Just waiting for the slides to come on. Yeah, that's the one. Sorry about that. There we go. Right, I think we're ready to go. Thanks a lot for being here again. I think the CEO, thanks a lot for the kind words, Eddie. As you may all be aware, we are now in our 4th year of our current strategic plan cycle, which started back in 2016. And as per good practice, it is always a good thing to sit back and do some stock take of how well we've done during the strategic plan cycle, which we're still in, and probably make corrections, and at the same time take on board what we can have in order to construct the next one. Before I go any further, I would like to point out, as you can see on the screen, the slight timelines that led us to where we are today. The previous strategic plan that we had was for the period 2009 and 2016. I think it's important for us to know a bit of history before we move into the future. And by December 2013, we started the process of defining the new strategic plan based on inputs from members, which is always the case. We always take inputs from members during the meetings, during consultations, and on the mailing list, the face-to-face, and we also, during our meetings especially. And in January 2014, the board and staff met in Mauritius to sort of start putting together the elements that will form part of our plan. And the document was actually consolidated by the AFRINIC previous CEO, Adiel. And in 2016, the document was actually updated and approved on the board, by the board. Likewise, I think I'm going to try and be as brief as possible because the actual assessment is a long document with very detailed, which is not going to be appropriate for me to show here. That document is going to be shortly be published for everyone to be able to have access, read through it, with more details, and probably at the same time submit comments and submit proposals and how we can better and what they would like to see in general in the next strategic plan of the organization. So under this current strategic plan, we had set 5 main strategic objectives. And they're all there on the screen right now. One of the first thing being a registration-based organization. That was our main focus. Effective, to end up with an effective registration and value-added service. Bearing in mind, most of these objectives are not just a destination. They are just a journey, and it's an ongoing thing that will keep on going and probably repeat itself in future strategic plan, because achieving one of them doesn't mean that we're going to stop. That means we need to move on to the next level of what needs to be done. The second item there, which was very, very important back in the time that we were doing this, was the financial sustainability. I'm sure many of you would recall that around that period, 2013, 14, 15, the organization was going through some kind of challenging phase with regards to its finances. And there was a lot of adjustment that needed to be done, and there was a lot of belt tightening and a lot of sacrifices, a lot of plans put in place. And I'm glad to say that this is one of the things that we have really been able to succeed in putting, which is visible today. Yeah, and we can't run our registry without having an agile and resilient infrastructure. I mean, that means all our infrastructure which is required in order to provide the services. And of course, we can't do much without the involvement of the community. And that usually it forms a very, very strong part of whatever we do, in everything that we do. Bearing in mind that AFRINIC is also formed part of the global family, and we need to also take care of the global infrastructure development. I'm now going to go through one by one and probably pick up a few of the sub-objective that was set from within each one of them. It's not all of them, it's not exhaustive for the purpose of this presentation. Like I said earlier on, a full, complete assessment will be published very shortly, where you will have access to a lot more details than just this. Now, each and every one, you will notice that, like for example, if we take the first one here, the effective registration and value-added services, the overall objective is not entirely met, because within that objective line, there are quite a number of sub-objectives that were set. Some of them were achieved, some of them were not achieved, some of them are in the process of being achieved. So basically, most of them are in the different stages of achievement or completion. So you will see on here, like for example, improve the speed and simplicity of resource allocation. A lot of work has gone into this, and this is still much to be done, and this has been put in as partially completed. And improve the WHOIS accuracy, that's also an ongoing task, which is really a long-standing thing which we have started a while ago, and which is very critical to running the registry. That's also partially achieved. And it's encouraging the use of AFRINIC routing registry. I think Madhvi just pointed out earlier on in her presentation, there's been a huge uptake of that particular item. So a lot of work has been done, and I'm glad to say that this part of it can be considered as wholly achieved. Again, if I move to the second objective, it's the financial sustainability. I think we can safely say at this point in time that this objective has been completely met. Because if we look at our balance sheet for a few number of years now, the proof is there. We now have a very healthy balance sheet. Our cash flow is looking really good. And this is essential in order for us to be able to carry out the other objectives that we have set for ourselves. Without a properly sustained financial environment, it is extremely hard to focus on other services that we may, even if we want to, it's not easy to actually deliver those without a proper, strong financial background. So if you look at all of this, you will see that a lot of these things have been achieved. We now have a very strong reserve. We have managed to master management of our costs, especially the important costs of our HR costs and our travel costs. We have systems in place that help us to exercise financial prudence. And we have a properly defined budgets and activity plan, which is linked to the budgets. So I think this is one area which has really, we must say, we have really completed. It's not the end, it's a matter of now keeping it going, bearing in mind that it can easily get out of hand if we lose sight of it. And one of the things we don't want to get back to in that same situation that we found ourselves in the past. So I think it's something, whilst it has been achieved, it's going to be very important that we actually keep a very close eye on it and going forward. The next one is to have an agile and resilient infrastructure. And again, that's been marked as partially, not entirely completed, because some of the elements within that that objective has been completed, but some of it has not been achieved. Bearing in mind, I'm sure I must have said that earlier on, the strategy plan runs from 2016 to 2020. This means that we still got just over a year to still accomplish quite a number of things that we haven't actually completed now. And the budget for the next period, financial period, has actually included elements that needs to be looked at, especially the critical one. You will see on there's a couple of them which, especially for our infrastructure, like having a critical continuity of our services, and to have a proper, well-developed business plan and disaster recovery, and to ensure that our infrastructure are really very strong to withhold any kind of blip that we may have, because without our infrastructure, I don't think we can go very far. So quite a number of these are becoming the focus of okay, yeah, it seems like I'm going too fast to the translators. Okay, sorry about that. This is going to be a main focus. That's slow enough. This is going to be a main focus for the next period, and I think we will probably ask the community and all the membership to bear with us whilst we work on some of those things which we recognize as being extremely, extremely crucial. And I think we are on the right track. And I can say that by the end of this strategic plan cycle, we would be able to report that our infrastructure can be said to be fairly strong and robust by the end of 2020. The community development, that's also an ongoing objective. It's always great to have participation, to encourage participation in our meetings. Again, it's not a destination, but it's something that we need to set ourselves to continuously improve, and things are changing around us. We're moving, for example, into, I think that was mentioned again by Madvi, into phase 2 of our soft landing, which will require a different approach to many things, and which will include communications, strategic change, and the training, and quite a lot of number of things that needs to be reoriented in order to put ourselves in the new frame that we're entering. For example, the V6 coming in, we will need to probably educate the community a lot more with V6 services, and also help out with the deployment. There's a lot of uptake of V6, but the deployment itself is not exactly very up there. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of work to be done there as well. But again, I'm hoping that by the end of the cycle, we would be able to report that most of these would have been accomplished, or if any, there would be a few that might end up being carried forward to the next strategic cycle. The global infrastructure development, again, that has been partly met. And this is basically participating and being part and being visible in the global field. We need to participate and collaborate a lot more, and participate in global policy discussions, taking part in forums, and be visible, be present, because a lot of time we hear that, oh, Africa was not there. And as AFRINIC, I think we have a responsibility, a duty to ensure that we are there, and not only being present, but also participating fully, so that we can also benefit from everything that is happening around in the internet world. Right. Obviously, along the way, we have had challenges. This whole process has not gone without challenges, and we should be the first to admit it. I think everyone would know that during this strategic period, we've had two changes of leadership, which does not exactly create a sense of stability. I mean, we continue to provide the services, but there is an adaptation period for the newcomer. We've had a change of leadership at the time that we started. Like, for example, when the cycle started, Adiel, who was part and parcel of the preparation and then coordination of all this, he moved on. So, and then we had a new person joining in who had to get used to the system, putting things together and then move on. So I think taking all this into account, I believe we have done not too badly. Okay. And there's been obviously a shift in focus in the process, and there's always been transitions after transitions. And this has not helped in the delivering of of the objectives as we would have wished it was. And we also, during that same period, we had a rather unprecedented high turnover among the HOD level, who is very crucial within the departments. And annual reviews, we have been guilty as well of not really conducting proper annual reviews of the plan versus activities. And so we lost a bit of track there. But I think all these are learning curves, and we are hoping that this will be taken on board in the next one. And I think we have also have an unintentional disconnect between the activity plan and the strategic objectives. So I think on many occasions we have looked at what was required and not paying too much attention to the strategic objectives. But this again is another thing that we have learned. We're going to take on board, and we're going to input for the next cycle. Again, I mentioned earlier on about the focus on getting the financials on track. This has also probably contributed to a bit of overshadowing the other strategic objectives, but having achieved that, the achieving of a financial stability on the next cycle may not take that front stage anymore, but at least be at the background and allowing space for the other strategic objectives that we need to focus on. Now, I think Eddie has also mentioned that he's going to talk a little bit more about this. All I'm going to just add here for the purpose of this slide is that we are about to start the process. In fact, the assessment of the 2016 and 2020 strategic plan is part of the process of kicking off the next cycle. So, I mean, a lot that we've learned that we're going to take on board from what just happened will go into the building of the next one. Okay, so the assessment was done in October this year, and as I said earlier on, it will be circulated so that it will enable members and membership and community to understand, to get a much deeper view of what actually was achieved and what should be achieved. So I think the bottom line there is the plan is to have a draft strategic plan for the next cycle, 21-25, to be presented by our next meeting in Kinshasa for the AIS 20 meeting. I think with that, I'm going to close here. I think I've talked too much, and thank you very much for your attention.